You've probably shopped at Aldi before, but did you know that it started as a tiny German bakery? Two brothers turned it into a $100 billion empire, split that empire in two, vanished from public life, and one of them was kidnapped for a $16 million ransom. This is how Aldi quietly took over the grocery store world. In a small German town, two grocery stores stood side by side. One, a small family shop run by Karl and Anna Albrecht. The other, a general store 3 times bigger, boldly advertising itself as the cheapest source for groceries. This rivalry would help spark the story of Aldi. But it all began with a marriage in 1913 between Karl Albrecht and Anna Siebmann. They moved into an apartment in Schönberg, where at just 27, Karl started his first business, a specialty store in all types of bread and better baked goods, coffee and jams. From the outset, he was serious about business. One of his earliest strategies was a discount stamp booklet. Customers would collect stamps with each shop, and once all were collected, they could get money back. Karl, being the frugal man he was, made sure to put in small print that a small cost would be deducted from their refund to cover stamp costs. This mentality of passing costs onto the customer would be exactly what would make Aldi a major success. Their first competition was a general store located right next door to the Albrecht shop. Kaufhaus F.W. Jutt was about 3 times as big as the Albrecht store and advertised itself as the cheapest source for groceries. Regardless, Karl and Anna worked hard at growing their business until 1914, when World War I put a stop to everything. Karl, along with F.W. Jutt, who was the owner of the general store next door, went off to fight, leaving their wives to take over their businesses. Anna stepped in without hesitation. Thankfully, Karl made it back from the war in 1918. However, F.W. Jutt wasn't so lucky. A year later, Mr. Jutt's widow put their shop in an adjoining apartment up for sale, and guess who bought it? The Albrechts. What was once their competition had now become their new shop location and home. They had no idea this building would become Aldi's store number 1, the launchpad for their son's empire. The new shop location marked the beginning of an exciting new chapter for the young couple. Karl Sr. and Anna were working side by side in their shop, expanding their product selection and even hiring a few employees. And just a year later, in 1920, Karl Jr. was born. 2 years after that, Theo joined the family. These boys would go on to found Aldi and become 2 of the richest billionaires in the world. Karl and Theo grew up in the shadow of financial hardship. After World War I, Germany's economy was in ruins and inflation skyrocketed, leaving many families struggling to get by. To help their neighbors, Karl Sr. and Anna allowed customers to buy on credit, trusting they'd pay when they could. Life was modest but stable. Church on Sundays, a loving household, and parents who worked relentlessly to pay the bills. The boys learned early the importance of saving every penny. Once the brothers left school, they both did apprenticeships. Now during this time, their father had fallen ill and so wasn't able to help as much in the store. So, Karl went out and trained at a high-end grocery store, while Theo stayed home to help his mother run the family store. Both were learning skills that would later build Aldi. But World War II interrupted all of this, and both brothers were enlisted. Their mother was forced to take care of their shop once again. The young men did not pursue military careers and actually distanced themselves from the Nazi ideology. However, they had to stick it out until they were both captured by Allied forces. During this time, their father sadly passed away from his illness. Anna had now lost her husband, was worried about her 2 sons at war, and had the responsibility of running their large store by herself. So when Karl and Theo returned from captivity in 1946, she couldn't be happier. And this is where the little shop that survived 2 wars was about to trigger a retail revolution. When Karl and Theo returned from the war in 1946, their mother handed over the store to them, but the country was in a bad state. There were shortages of goods, ration stamps, and a currency that wasn't worth much. The brothers got straight to work, getting acquainted again with the world of storekeeping. However, the first 2 years were just survival for the young men. In 1948, many say this is the true beginning of the brothers' incredible business breakthrough. This is in part due to the introduction of the Deutschmark, a replacement of Germany's old currency, which had lost all its value after the war. Carl and Theo almost immediately opened a new store only a few minutes walk away. It was very small, and they hired a branch manager to run it. They then opened another small grocery store, and another, but they quickly realized how expensive it was to set up new locations. So Carl and Theo sat down together to brainstorm. In order to keep opening stores at this rate, they needed to save money somewhere. So they decided to only stock the shelves with products they knew people would buy, such as bread, meat, and butter. They also kept the size of the shops small, spent little to no money on advertising, and most importantly, kept their prices low. Although this was a survival strategy at the time, this would later become their incredibly successful business model, which led them to make billions. The new strategy worked, and by 1949, their average monthly turnover per store was 8,100 Deutschmark, which is the equivalent of $6,500 today. By 1950, they had opened 13 small shops. At the time, there were a few chain grocery stores in Essen, where they lived, which the brothers saw as competition. This was largely why they put such a big focus on expansion. The brothers were very careful with their money and continued to invest all their profits into expansion. By 1953, they had 30 store locations. Because they spent practically nothing on advertising, they were able to lower the prices even more, which made them very popular. People would line up outside the stores before opening times to be the first to buy their cheap products. Each store's average monthly revenue at this point was 20,000 Deutschmark, which is about $16,000. Imagine their excitement. With all this hard-earned cash, the Albrecht brothers started buying up entire grocery store chains to speed up expansion. So when 1959 came around, they had a total of 300 shops. But what happened next completely threatened the entire business. In the 1960s, Albrecht, the name of their business at the time, was in real danger. Their prices were no longer as low as customers wanted, and their small shops were becoming outdated. Meanwhile, competitors were opening large, modern self-service supermarkets. The all-new self-service feature meant that instead of asking a clerk to fetch goods, customers could now walk the aisles, pick items off the shelves themselves, and pay at the counter. For German shoppers, this was revolutionary. Carl and Theo tried to adapt, opening a handful of self-service stores of their own. But their locations were often tiny, under 100 square meters, with barely enough space for essentials. Compared to the wide aisles of their competitors, Albrecht's stores felt like a step backwards. By 1960 to 1961, their attempts at self-service were just bleeding money. To make matters worse, in Essen just down the road, a man named Heinz Landschlager opened what he proudly called the first free Essen discount house. It was 1,000 square meters and stocked with thousands of discounted products. And he wasn't alone. By late 1962, a discount hysteria swept across the region. New chains popped up with big banners promising cheap prices. For Carl and Theo, the danger couldn't have been clearer. They had built over 300 shops, but now the very business model they had thrived on was in jeopardy. But Carl wasn't one to panic. Instead, he studied what was happening and realized something crucial. Self-service supermarkets were expensive to run, with wide aisles, huge stocks, and costly displays. If he could strip things down even further, he might actually win customers back. So, in June 1962, Carl tested a bold experiment in the small city of Dinslaken. He took one of their self-service shops, ripped out the fancy fittings, and replaced them with plain wooden shelves and pallets. He slashed the product range to just 300 essential items, including butter, sugar, flour, coffee, and canned goods. He didn't waste any money on fancy displays or advertising. He just focused on the basics. And due to the cutbacks, he managed to slash product prices by 20 to 50%. The store was an instant hit. Customers lined up, thrilled to pay half what other shops charged. The experiment worked so well that within weeks, Carl opened 4 more stripped-down shops, and in a matter of months, Aldi's future was secured. It was around this time that the brothers finally decided on a proper brand name for their empire. Up until then, the stores were simply known as Albrecht shops, but with hundreds of locations, they needed something shorter and catchier. Using the first 2 letters of Albrecht and the first 2 letters of discount, they came up with Aldi. The name first appeared in 1962 and slowly spread across their stores. Aldi held on to this stripped-back, cost-cutting business strategy, and it brought the brothers billions in revenue. In fact, by the 1970s, the brothers were billionaires. But just as the business was turning around, another problem was brewing behind the scenes. The 2 brothers, once inseparable, had a major clash. By 1961, the Albrecht Empire had become a family feud. The brothers were running over 300 shops, but the differences in personality started to show. Carl was the strategist, calm, methodical, and always thinking long term. Theo, on the other hand, had a reputation for being detail-obsessed and even controlling. While Carl wanted distance and peace, Theo liked to micromanage. Their mother, Anna, who had once been the balancing force in the family, had stepped back from the business by 1960. Without her, the tensions grew unbearable. The brothers realized they couldn't keep running everything together. And so in 1961, Carl proposed something radical, a complete split of the company. Theo agreed. They divided Germany into 2 territories, with a border running roughly through the middle of the country, later nicknamed the Aldi Equator. To the south, Carl would run what would become Aldi Süd. To the north, Theo took control of Aldi Nord. It was a quiet but monumental decision. From then on, the 2 companies would operate independently with different headquarters, different strategies, and even different store designs. And yet both kept the same guiding principle: cut costs and pass savings onto the customer. And for a while, the split worked perfectly. Both Aldi Nord and Aldi Süd grew rapidly. But one night in the 1970s, something happened to Theo that was so unexpected, it changed the brothers' lives forever. On the evening of November 29th, 1971, Theo Albrecht finished work as usual. He locked up the office, walked over to his Mercedes, and climbed into the driver's side door. What he didn't know was that 2 armed men were waiting in the shadows. As Theo shut the door, the men rushed forwards. "Are you Mr. Albrecht?" one asked. Theo replied quietly, "Yes." He was gagged, bound, and driven off into the night. The billionaire Aldi brother had just been kidnapped. The mastermind was a shady lawyer named Heinz Joachim Ollenberg, aided by his criminal partner Paul Kron. They had chosen Theo precisely because of his reputation for secrecy. Whoever is so silent, Ollenberg reasoned, will pay a ransom quietly. Theo was first held in Paul Kron's garage, then moved to Heinz Ollenberg's law office in Dusseldorf. There, in a back room, Theo spent 17 days tied up. He was given a newspaper to read, including an article exposing his fortune to the public for the first time. For a man who'd lived his whole life in secrecy, it was torture. The kidnappers initially demanded 100,000 Deutschmarks, then raised it to 7 million, which is $16 million, one of the highest ransoms ever in Germany. Theo agreed, and they planned the exchange. On December 19th, 1971, the money was delivered by the priest at Theo's church, and in return, the kidnappers let him go. He returned home, pale, exhausted, and visibly shaken. In a rare TV interview, he spoke very briefly of the matter. For a man known for his silence, he became even more reclusive. The ransom was never fully recovered. Years later, Theo even tried to deduct the payments as a business expense on his taxes, but the authorities refused. One thing was certain: Theo would never feel truly safe again. In fact, decades later in 1995, he spent 1.5 million marks, about $2.2 million, on a specially armored Mercedes, complete with bulletproof glass, its own oxygen supply, and even a hidden phone in the trunk. a man once known for his frugality had paid a fortune, all because of a fear that never left him. The kidnapping was a turning point. Theo retreated further from public life, and the family built an iron wall of privacy around themselves. But what happened to Aldi itself? Despite Theo's trauma, Aldi only grew stronger. The company had already built its reputation on low prices and simplicity. After the kidnapping, the brothers doubled down on secrecy, letting the stores speak for themselves. By the late 1970s, Aldi had become a nationwide phenomenon in Germany. By the 1980s, it had expanded across Europe, and in 1976, Aldi sued across the Atlantic, opening its first US store in Iowa. Today, Aldi operates in more than 20 countries with over 12,000 stores worldwide. Its annual revenue exceeds $100 billion, making it one of the largest retailers on earth. Aldi has become synonymous with affordability, efficiency, and a no-frills shopping experience. And it all started with two brothers from a modest bakery in Essen, who turned frugality into a global empire. If you like this, you'll love this video about the CEO of Nissan who made millions and then committed the perfect crime. I'll see you there.